everybody. Welcome to Holy Foley. I'm Dr. Vanessa Thiemoment, and my guest today is Bastian Gerner. He's from Germany. He's a Foley artist, sound editor, and mixer. Bastian is also known as the Foley teacher, which we will talk about today because that's pretty interesting. Bastian comes to us, as I said, from Germany. He's worked in video games and television and film. Some of the video games are Assassin's Creed Nexus VR and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. He's also worked on Brecht, and I studied Bertolt Brecht, so I'm going to be interested in that. Amsterdam Undercover, Inga Lindstrom, and Land of Light. Welcome, Bastian. I'm really excited to talk to you. And as I said, I really love the German language. And as I've told you, I've sung in German, and I have a little trouble with the umlaut, as so many Americans do. And I struggle with that. But what a pleasure to speak with you. So how are you?
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for bringing me on. And I'm fine, thank you.
Yes.
I just finished a movie. This is my new studio here. And I finished a feature film in here right now, like last week on Thursday. So I'm quite happy that I could accomplish this. It's always so interesting to start working in a new space.
Yes.
And so I was happy with the results, and also the clients were happy, and so yeah, I'm pretty fine. I'm doing well, thank you.
So you have your own space now, your own studio.
Yes.
And what town are you in?
I'm in Düsseldorf,
Düsseldorf.
Germany, next to Cologne, yeah.
Next to Cologne. Ah, well, I have not been to Düsseldorf. As I think I mentioned to you before, I have a cousin living in Germany, and my son has been to Germany a couple of times. I have not been there yet, but I will. I will. So you have a new space, and how long have you had this studio?
This particular studio I started building early this year. So let's say I'm working in here just literally since five weeks. This is maybe the 6th week I'm actively working in here.
Oh, so you're working the bugs out still.
Yeah. And before that, I already built a new studio in the city center of Düsseldorf, but I had to move out there, surprisingly. So after finishing the first studio in Düsseldorf, I had to tear it down and then build this one, which is a bit sad because I lost my Atmos setup, and all the work that went in the old studio is gone. But on the other hand, now I have this space. And for recording and performing Foley, this space is better because it has more space, more laid out concrete floor, and also this gorgeous wood floor in the back that was already built in. And I put my modular wood floors on top of that. And yeah, so that's
are you
where
working in a smaller space and you're learning how to adjust it and move it around? And when you teach, which we'll get to in a little while, you actually kind of tutor people on how to work with limited spaces, right? Which
exactly, yeah,
really valuable.
Even from home.
Yeah, that's very valuable. And we're going to talk about that. But first, I want to hear about how you got started in this, because every Foley artist, and I know you also mix and edit, every Foley artist has a peculiar way of getting started. Now, those of us who are old veterans in Hollywood, I got started in the 80s, and it was very industrial, and there weren't very many of us. And I got started with the old veterans who started way back and trained in the industrial method here in Hollywood. So for me, Bastian, it's really interesting to talk to people from other countries that had a different methodology and a different way of learning, because coming from the Hollywood industrial method, and as I've researched people from so many different countries and smaller markets in the United States, I find it fascinating, all the different ways that people perform sound, because all I'd ever known before I started venturing out and talking to other people was the Hollywood way, which is a standard that so many people are familiar with, but it's fascinating to find all the different ways that people approach the same problem of how do you put in Foley into a film or television show or long form, short form, or video game, or, what will probably be TikTok and all the other, formats. So, what I want to hear about is your process. And since you do video games, why don't we start out with the two video games we mentioned, Avatar and The Assassins. I want to talk about those two video games first, if you don't mind.
Okay. Before that, I can quickly tell you how I got into this.
That'd be great.
Um, all right. So I first started out as a rapper, and then after
Wait,
many
wait, wait,
years of
wait,
pursuing,
wait. Okay. I'm talking to my very first person who started out as a rapper and became a Foley artist. So right away, because I'm a musician, I'm a singer and songwriter, I know I'm talking with someone who is focused on rhythm and percussiveness.
yeah,
You're my first rapper turned Foley artist. So now I'm really intrigued.
yeah.
So carry on.
Okay. So after many years of pursuing this career, no money came in, and then I married very early on. And the only thing I haven't looked into back then in terms of sound engineering was sound for films. And I was living in Potsdam back then, and they have a very famous film school. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna study at that film school. I have to learn this now. And they never accepted me, but I made my way into the industry differently through internships and eventually, in the end, an apprenticeship over almost 3 years in a post-production facility that I really loved. And
Uh-huh.
they showed me all the things I wanted to learn: sound effects editing, dialogue editing. I could watch the mixing process and then mixed student films myself there. And from that job, I landed my first gig as an intermediate sound effects editor already after this apprenticeship. And in that company in Berlin, I stayed then for for 7 years. And within those 7 years, I evolved then into becoming a Foley artist.
I see.
And the process was, I was mixing a show, and we didn't have a 5.1 setup at our location, so we rented out a different space. And the owner of that space, he used to be a Foley artist. Now he's mixing himself more than doing Foley, but he had this small hybrid room, in like ADR Foley room, in his studio, and we were using his mixing stage. And I was just talking to him, and he was telling about the good old times, doing Foley on tape and all these things. And then he said, "Yeah, I can finish a TV movie in 2 days, no problem. And you don't have to even edit that." And I was like, coming from that European cinema approach, having 5, maybe 10 days of recording and then 20 days of editing for a feature film. And I already dialed that down working in TV a lot, but not that much. And then I was kind of challenging him and brought my next film to him and said, "Yeah, okay, let's do it. And maybe I can look over your shoulder how you do it." And so we did that. And then I brought my second film, and then I already assisted him. And the third film, I assisted him even more. And I think with the fourth film, I then did it myself, and just consulted him with scenes that I couldn't accomplish myself, just complicated stuff, people doing stuff in the kitchen, and I couldn't know how I could handle this, like, except for recording 50 takes. And then I called him, and he showed me how he did it, and that's how I learned it. And the whole thing was motivated because in the facility I was working, we were building a recording space, and my manager asked me if I want to become a Foley artist. And
What was this
that was
Foley artist?
actually
What was this Foley artist's name that you were working with?
uh, Carsten Ray.
Cass what?
Carsten Ray.
Casted right. Huh.
Ray. Ray.
Uh-huh.
Carsten
Casted right.
Ray. Like
Okay.
Ray. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And he trained two other Foley artists, and one of them is the most famous one from Germany, Carsten Richter. So Carsten Richter has all the international credits.
Uh-huh.
He's basically one of the only ones in Germany who works on these big international productions.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have the same mentor.
Excellent.
And so and that's actually already the interesting thing about Carsten Rey is that he has this old school German approach, which is very different from the Hollywood approach. So there are even some old TV things that you can watch online of German Foley artists back in the days. They were basically sitting and performing the footsteps sitting.
Yes, I'm aware of
Um,
that, which is
and then,
very interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also I was also introduced to that in that way. So Carsten had this, as I said, small hybrid recording space for doing ADR and also a bit of Foley. And there were no dedicated Foley floors in that studio. So he only had that small stone. Maybe you can see that if I go away here. Um, Not really, but I show you.
Aha.
So a stone like that. And then he was also sitting on a chair in front of that stone and doing all the sounds at once. Like he wears a jeans when he does the Foley. And then he uses his body. I can show you. Um, Basically like that.
Uh-huh.
And that way,
I actually worked with on one film, Jake Speed. I worked with a man who had done that style, and he didn't do it with me. He had me do the Foley my style, but he was known for coming in and doing Foley on films before he supervised. That way, he'd sit in a chair and he'd have a surface in front of him and he used the cloth on him and rub it on his clothes. And everybody said that's how he did it. And so I knew a man that did this, and it was really interesting because he was known all over Hollywood for coming in when he did his own little independent films before he started kind of having other people do it, doing it that way. So I was familiar with that technique back in the mid 80s. And we were all very
hmm,
humored because of course nobody did it that way in Hollywood, but we were aware that the Germans did that.
yeah, and Carsten is also from that era, and there was this moment in time when I was assisting him that after the work was done, he said, "Look, now I'm gonna go to the other room and I'm gonna record you now, and you have to do it." And this was my first moment in my life that I performed footsteps ever. I mean, I did record Foley a couple of times in all those years. I edited really tons of Foley, many movies and episodes. I was quite good in Foley editing. And at that point in time, I already mixed films and did the whole sound effects process on movies. So I really knew a lot about Foley and how Foley should sound in a movie, but I never performed it myself. And so he gave me a quite complicated scene, a woman walking up some stairs and then running and then slowing down and then going down some steps. And so I did that the way he showed me. I just copied that. And then he said, "Yeah, okay, thanks. Let's do it again." And I did it again. And then he came back to the other room and then he said, "Look, you should really pursue this career because you're very talented. I've never seen that someone does it in that manner at the first time." And so it was not a problem for me to get in sync with the lady. And so that's how I started out. And then when the studio in my company where I was employed at was finished, I just was bombarded with projects. I just recorded and never stopped for a couple of years, and then I changed into the video games industry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And I worked then at Ubisoft in Düsseldorf. That's also why I moved from Berlin to the western part of Germany.
Mhm.
I worked at Ubisoft Düsseldorf for 5 years, and I finished those two projects you mentioned, Assassin's Creed Nexus VR and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, amongst other projects. And that was really interesting because I never wanted to work in the video games industry, but this opportunity came across. And the thing I always wanted to work with Carsten Richter on those big international movies.
Right.
And I even invited him to lunch, and I really made clear that I want to be part of their team, but there was no space for me.
Hmm.
No matter what I did. I even brought my boss to the facility there and asked him to rent out a space so that I'm closer to those guys. So I really was invested, but it never happened. And then this opportunity occurred, and I understood very quickly that this would be then working on international projects. So that's what sold it to me to work on video games. And only after that, I found out that so many people want to work in video games, and that's the newest, latest
Right.
hype and very big thing.
Yes.
And as I was really motivated to get the job, I got it.
Hmm.
Also, very funny story because I basically brought my whole rack, what you can see here in the back. So all that outboard gear that's back there,
Uh-huh.
I put in my car, and also my surfaces and many props, and the whole car was basically packed. And I had to do this I had to do this overnight because this was all installed at the facility I was employed at. Back then, I was already recording myself there for a short amount of time. So I had all my gear in the recording room itself, and the control room was basically empty while I was working. And then I had to come in one night, deinstall everything, put everything in my car, including the surfaces and the props and everything, when everyone was already gone. And I had to be back at Monday, and everything should be there because I didn't want everyone to know that I would apply for another job, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
Oops.
so I took that whole car full of Foley gear then to Düsseldorf for my interview there. And the audio director Stefan Randelshofer, he was very busy that day, and he's always very specific in how he operates. So he came down and said, "Yeah, you here already? Yeah, we are really busy. So wait half an hour, and then you can come upstairs." And I said, "Wait, I have all my gear with me, and I have to be up and running before we can have the interview because I want to show you how I do it, right?" And I said, "Oh, well, yes, okay, then do whatever you have to do, and we meet in 2 hours or 1 hour or whatever." And then I started building up all the gear, and the elevator was broken. So I ended up building my whole rack, with my iMac, all the cabling, all the outboard gear I had to screw in the rack, everything. So I built the whole studio in the parking garage, because the elevator didn't work. And then they found me in the parking garage, and then Stefan just took my rack, with all the 15,000 euro gear, and just disappeared with it. Like he basically ran away with the rack,
Uh-oh.
bringing it upstairs. And I had then to carry this heavy metal plate that I was also carrying with me, which was way too heavy to just run after him. And it was so funny. Like when I ended up in that room, I was already done. And then we plugged all my stuff into their computer, and then they played back a game they were just developing back then, and I was delivering them a mono signal out of my interface, and that was then recorded onto their computer. And then they just played the game, and I did live Foley to what I ever saw on the screen, and that's how I presented myself. And then they just had to press play on their machine, and then the Foley was played back on their speakers, and it was basically matching the picture, right? So that's
So
if that makes sense.
it does. And I have a question now. Do you think your improvisational ability as a rapper helped you
Mm.
become improvisational as a Foley artist?
Yeah, probably yes, because improvisation is really the thing I'm so invested in when I'm rapping still.
Right.
Um, there is this guy called Harry Mack. So everyone who's not into rap, it's still worth checking him out
Oh,
because he's doing
I
that now
even
for a
know,
couple.
I know Harry Mack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So this guy,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm basically him.
Because
I'm basically him
we have a
in a
news
German version.
we have a news guy here, Ari Melber, who is really into rap. He's on one of our cable news stations here, and he is really into rap, and he brought him on. And they would just throw, it was like improv theater. They just threw a word at him, and they would just keep holding up cards, and they would have like sequences of words, and then he would just keep rapping and rapping. And
Mm,
I've come from theater. And so one of the things that we do is we get people tossing us an idea, and then we just improv a scene, you know. And what Harry
yeah.
Mack does, as you know, is they hold up a card, and he'd see like the three words, and then he'd just keep rapping on it, and then hold up another three words, and he'd come up with the rhyming raps and everything. And it's hysterical.
Mm.
If that's the kind of rap you're doing, and you're doing improvisational rap where you're just getting an idea and you're moving and you're moving and you're moving, I can now see how you would just be able to function in improvisational Foley, which
Mm.
now I'm really fascinated. So then I can see how you would just in your head be thinking improvisationally about how to be doing all of this. And I can just see it. And now I got to tell you, Bastian, now I'm thinking, wow, would that make an interesting video? It would make an interesting video watching you kind of doing your rap brain doing Foley. I would be fascinated by that. What would it be like to film someone who was a rapper
Yeah.
and he's constantly thinking in an improvisational way doing Foley? Now I just kind of want to film it. So
Yeah.
that's fascinating to me. And I would see how that would, and now I'm going to add something else. I see how that would be really interesting for video games because they have to have a heightened reality, because I've done a few. They have to have a heightened reality, and they have to have a certain playfulness and surrealness to them. So this is all really kind of an interesting, different approach to how someone would perceive how they would do Foley.
And now I try to reimagine what you said to let's say my approach because um I can see that my improvisational brain works really well when I perform props because it's just that moment that I just take that inspiration and think about, okay, what can I use? And then it happens and I just grab the things and start doing it. But
Right.
um, in terms of in terms of footsteps, um, this is just a natural thing to me. But from my perspective as a mixer and sound effects editor, and also working mainly on drama and stuff with a production sound. I
Right.
never really worked on animation before I started working on video games.
Mm-hmm.
So I always had this approach of how to record the Foley that it really blends into the dialogue and hides within, this typical European kind of approach that the Foley is not there anymore. It's just within the production sound. And
Right.
that's basically what I really love, to
Yeah,
achieve. So
I
I'm
appreciate.
only happy if that is then the case. And that's the interesting thing because I'm also an engineer. I I now have this ability to make everything come together when I record myself because I use a lot of high and low cut. and a little bit of compression. And then I don't use my whole body weight all the time. More to the contrary, because I have the microphones on my headphone, I can then control the amount of force I'm putting onto the surface, and
Huh.
the surface is mic'd in a different way. It has two elements. It has a main mic and a low end microphone. So I can basically move my foot closer to the low end microphone and then increase my force. And with this, I can already create perspective. And then these things are really the things I enjoy when I record myself, that I can do those things, that I can increase my weight, and that I can use all these techniques that then come together, which is very complex, so that I keep being challenged while I'm working, you know. And there was one particular situation when I was working with my beloved mixer, really, Fabian Weichmann. We did 1.5 years together, and that was a very important time for me to grow as a Foley artist with him, because be before that I always trained ADR mixers recording me as a Foley artist while figuring out being a Foley artist myself. So that was very stressful and not very satisfactory. And then after everything failed, and I even had my best friend trained, and then we were no friends anymore, and he had to leave the company and everything was drama. I called up Fabian, and we were basically doing the apprenticeship back in the days together. So he was at the same level of experience, and he also recorded lots of Foley in all those years. So that was the first time I met someone at eye level within recording Foley with a mixer together. So he was really like brilliant, and he helped me so much, focusing more on my craft and giving his thoughts to the whole process. And I could trust him with recording, and so everything was a bit more at ease. And then we had those like no 1.5 years together, and within those years, we managed to get over that threshold of finishing a TV movie in 3 days. So that is basically the thing that we have to come up with in Germany in order to be in the cash flow realm, yeah,
Mhm.
so that we can earn money with that. Before that, we always took at least 4 days to finish a movie, and then after 1 year, it made click, and we could then finish it in 3 days. And it was really like we didn't have to talk anymore about anything. Basically, it was really good, and we also didn't get too much in fights. There was maybe one fight in 1.5 years. So this was really a great time. And but I remember one thing. Always when I used the wood floor that is also here basically in the back with the carpet on it,
Mhm.
I saw him going to the gain of the mixing desk and gaining down the microphone.
Mhm.
And that was basically because the AD converters of that DigiDesign interface back then, they couldn't really take the the signal from the Sennheiser microphone
Ah,
with that level of gain. And then we had always those clicks in the sound, digital clicks. And so he dialed down the sound. And then when I started recording myself in the same room with my gear sitting next to me, I realized then that I was always pushing way too hard on the surface.
right.
And that realization is just what I tried to explain before when I record myself, that I really like this challenge to get all the things I know and I love, because I also love to be an engineer and have a compressor and an EQ and do stuff, you know, in Pro
Yeah.
Tools and all
You
these
like to
things.
play with it.
Yeah, and I can do that now all together, and also perform the sounds and not sit in my chair all day just staring at a screen. I can move, I can
So
stand
you
up,
still
you
sit
know,
in the
do.
chair and do the Foley the old German style.
Mm, I started I stopped that basically when I worked at Ubisoft, because there were basically no footsteps anymore needed. I as a TV films guy, I was recording footsteps every day, right? It was at least a third of my day. And then I was working 5 years at Ubisoft, and you could basically count the hours I recorded footsteps in with two hands. It was just not footsteps anymore. It was just other stuff with my hands. And so I stopped basically sitting down. And also with the only within the last year I started working on movies again. Um, and now I'm evolving basically back to the sitting performance. The only reason I have the chair now here back is because I want to be more efficient.
Right.
The thing is when I'm standing and I'm also only using one foot with that small surface, I just like the sound of it with
Yeah.
my setup. I can also use the whole poured concrete in my studio,
Mhm.
but I still like that little surface and I have my way, so I'm
Sure.
performing with one foot most of the time. And doing the last movie, I just realized I'm way too slow and the whole studio is not efficient enough yet. So I did a whole redecoration and put my desk on the other side of the room and then also put the chair back into the place so that I basically go back to where I left it 5 years ago when I still was working on movies in Berlin. So now I tried with the next movie, I try to sit down, have my PC next to me so that I can operate the Pro Tools while sitting, and also have the desk right next to
Wow.
me when I'm doing the props, that I don't have to move the microphones too far all the time, and
Right.
also that I can move my microphones around me and then using all the different surfaces that I have around me without too much movement so that I can do everything in one place.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the Sennheiser. Are you using the 416?
Yes.
Okay. So I just have to put in a plug now. Um, I've worked on so many different stages, and a lot of people have different microphones that they like. But I have to tell you, I have found the 416 to be my favorite microphone, and it is in many places the ubiquitous microphone, the favorite microphone. And it is my favorite microphone because I think it captures more of the mid range and it's as a shotgun. I just think it's a warmer microphone. A lot of people like the Sheps, a lot of people like the Neumann, and I think Neumanns are a little too bright and Sheps are a little too bassy. But yes, I think the Sennheiser 416 for an
Mm.
all-round warm sounding microphone that catches a lot of mid-range, which is usually missed. I would agree with you. I love the Sennheiser. And
Yeah.
and so when I've taught Foley in colleges, I usually have to say, you need to purchase a Sennheiser 416 because I just find that that is such a good workhorse microphone. And so when you said Sennheiser, I had a little flutter in my heart because it's just, I love that microphone so much. I just think it's a wonderful microphone. And then when
Yeah.
because it's one microphone that works well for both footsteps and most props. And it also, and I think you would agree, recording paper, working with paper is really hard because it can sound too bright or too brittle or too crisp or flat. And if you use either a Sheps, which can get kind of bassy, or a Neumann, which is bright, but a Sennheiser at the right distance, you can get the right kind of
Mm.
sound on the paper as well. So
Yeah.
I just got a little warm heart when you said Sennheiser because that's always been my favorite
Yeah.
microphone is the 416.
Also with water recordings.
Yes.
I just recorded some stuff, and I used a big condenser first, and then additionally recorded it together with the Sennheiser, and then I made a comparison, and the Sennheiser was so much more sitting in the picture
Wow.
already. It
Yeah.
was just a huge difference. And
Yeah.
for footsteps, I like the punch. It has a certain punch that the other microphones don't have.
Yeah.
And also the noise floor is lower.
Yes.
than with the ships, for
Yes.
example.
I really
And
love it.
but the ships, I must say, the MK41 capsule, it just sounds so natural. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like something that I mean, from my in my mind, I would always go for the Sheps if the noise floor was lower,
Right.
because
But it
this is
will pick
just
up
so
more noise.
natural.
It will pick up more
Yeah.
noise and because it's so sensitive, and then you've got that sound. I want to jump to your your side hustle, as we say in the United States, as the Foley teacher, because um, I find that really interesting. At first, it sounded a bit grand, but then as I started looking at it, I realized that what you were doing was trying to empower people who are trying to do their own thing in a small setting and trying to give them tips on how they can do their own stuff, like students or people with small studios. You're trying to empower the person who doesn't have a lot to work with. So can you tell me a little bit how you got started with that and what it is you're trying to do and how you try to help people? Because I think sound is so underserved in small projects, and a lot of students and independents probably don't do as much as they could. And Foley can do so
Yeah.
much. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you got started with that and what it is you do? Because I think that's
Mm,
really kind of a wonderful service that you're providing.
thank you. Yeah, I also enjoy it a lot. And I was first asked to teach at a private university many years ago. And then I found myself enjoying that so much, just talking 2 hours about Foley. I was just like stoked after I finished it. I was like, okay, now this feels great. Yeah. And then this side hustle thing kicked in. And I thought to myself, yeah, this can be something, because I also realized nowadays, if you're not on social media, if you're not presenting yourself, this is very hard, to make a living as a freelancer or to run your own business. Or it's also not smart to not do it if you want to do it, or if you think you are capable of it, or you like this kind of stuff. And that's how things came together. I started um, building an Instagram thing, and then this guy from Brazil really made a difference. So Ishaio Branco from Audiofilico, shout outs. He approached me, and I had 200 followers back then. And he said, look, you're doing great stuff there, and I can just recommend you post every day. And I also have a Foley Tuesday on my page. That was something he did back then. And maybe you can send me a quick video of you doing something, and I will post it on my page, because he had 5,000 followers back then. And it was huge for me. And I thought, okay, I have to do this, huh? And I also built my studio at home in Düsseldorf for that purpose. So I had a Dolby Atmos studio, but also a concrete floor in the basement, and I did all the things I needed for lighting and had a professional camera. So I did a huge investment in that, with the intention to do something online. But at that point in time, I was still busy with figuring everything out, how to record into OBS, how to get sound into from Pro Tools into the video, and it was just too much for me. And he just gave me the final kick. He said, like, okay, I need those videos until Monday. And I was traveling on Friday, and after finishing my work for Ubisoft, I only had like 1 hour to come up with something.
Mhm.
And then I just recorded 2 quick videos. It didn't take me very long, and send it over to him. And that was the start, because after that, we had a 2 hour meeting, and he really talked me into, look, you have to do this. You have now 140 days left in this year, and you have to have 140 videos on your profile by the end of the year. And I will promise you something will happen, because you do great stuff. And then I did that. And I had after the end of the year, I had like 35,000 followers or something.
Wow.
And that was really then giving me also the reassurance that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And as I was already trained in a way with non-ideal rooms with that small surface and working around all those problems you have in those kind of home studio situations with all the low end coming from the room and room construction. And then we worked around that with this other microphone. And so I know all these things because I had to learn it over the years. I thought to myself, this is something I can share with the sound community in order to enable many more people to record source sounds at home or in an edit suite. Because I worked so many years as a sound effects editor and
Yeah.
I never recorded myself anything. I never had a microphone next to me. And I know many people, especially in Hollywood and all the high level sound effects editor, they do that, of course. But back then, I was not a high level guy. I was just a regular guy starting out in the industry, and I didn't do that. So now, being years in as a Foley artist, when I now approach a sound effects project, I would always think, okay, I'm gonna record all the things I need. And when I'm finished doing all the things I can do, recording myself, then I will go to the library and then, grab the rest. And this approach I realized over the years, and I thought the tool set I have now is worth sharing with everyone so that you cannot only like when you do my coaching, you cannot only put a condenser next to you and record anything with your hands like that.
Mm-hmm.
You could go ahead all the way and record everything with impacts and different surfaces, and you have that all in one little corner ready to go all the time. So that enables people even to record Foley properly at home when they before only did that with MIDI syncing with the keyboard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there are many people who do that because the budget doesn't allow anything else, especially in countries like, I don't know, South America or you name it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also in Europe and in the US and Canada, there are people who work on smaller scope projects who cannot afford Foley, but sometimes they need it.
And
And I found out that
I'm thinking of students too, Bastian. And
yes,
and you
yeah,
keep
many
getting
students approached me, even school kids.
I'm thinking of students really being able to do their film projects in schools with more sound because frankly, the universities aren't really doing a lot of sound programs, and it's really a problem. And I think that the more they can understand how they can empower themselves to do something with sound, it would be very useful.
Yeah, there's something, I hope it works out in the future with the University of Utah. They wanted to fly me in and that I get some teaching done there. And they're also building a Foley room there. They wanted me to help them design it. So that is something I really hope that happens in the future. Um, and then, yeah, because I also wanted to come to the US one day. And I realized that also being in LA from time to time could be a wise thing as a freelancer or, just to make connections,
Yeah.
GDC conference for games, but also meeting the sound community in LA is definitely on my radar. I want to do this within the next years.
Well, it would be wonderful to meet you if you ever come here. And if you do come to Southern California, I definitely want to get together and hopefully someday I can come to Dusseldorf and get together
Yeah,
with
you're
you.
invited
Because it just
right away.
what an interesting fellow you are. And I'm just so glad that I got a hold of you because this just seems
Thank
like
you.
it's the beginning of many conversations that I would like to have with you sometime. So I'm just so glad that
Definitely,
I got
same
to
here.
talk with you. What a fun time. What an interesting
Yeah, it
fellow
was like
you
really
are.
exciting. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so it's this has just been an eye-opening experience for me because we're going from rapping to sitting in a chair and having everything right there and the headphones and using a Sennheiser 416 and doing it all right there by yourself and then teaching other people how to do it. There's a lot here, and I really hope that people will really think about how they can empower themselves and do a lot of stuff. But also, once again, what you've done before informs how you approach doing sound. So the world of performative sound is a fascinating world. And And Bastian, I want to thank you so much. This has just been really fun. You are a fun person.
Thank you, Vanessa. I also enjoyed it, and I also enjoyed your questions and your reflections, and also your summary now in the end. Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
thank you.